Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Captain Muffin here, and today we're going to be looking at something quite interesting. We're going to be looking at the performance difference between Flight Sim 2020 and Flight Sim 2024. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So I'm going to be trying to keep everything consistent across the two simulators. First, we're going to be trying out 2020 and see how the newly released 2024 stacks up against it. So let's go through the settings really quick. So for the settings, I'm going to be keeping everything on medium. So I'm going to use DirectX 12 and it's going to be on the medium setting. It's probably a good idea to mention my specs first. So I have a Intel i5 9400F and I have an RTX 3060 graphics card. So I would say I would have like a mid-spec PC, definitely not like high range by any means, but it's above the minimum specs for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think medium should provide me with a good experience, but we're gonna be putting this to the test. So I'm doing this at 1440p. I'm using TAA for my anti-aliasing. Render scaling at 100 and sharpening at 100. I'm not gonna go through every settings, but VSync is off, low latency is off, and apart from that, everything else is on medium. I'm also going to be using the same aircraft in both simulators. I'm gonna use the AnyBuilds A320neo V2 because it's available in both simulators, and I'll even use the same livery as well. I'm gonna use this Iberia livery, and I will spawn in at the Paris airport, Charles de Gaulle Paris airport, and I'm gonna spawn in at gate E21 for our test. So good, let's go ahead and load in and let's get into this performance comparison. So here we are, guys. We are in the simulator and we're parked up at the gate at the moment at the Paris airport, and just sitting around here in the aircraft with nothing on. It looks like we're getting about 40 FPS, which I don't mind at all for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So let's go ahead and power up some systems and see how that's going to affect our performance. I have to say, the graphics on medium still look stunning here in Flight Sim 2020. So let's get our batteries on and external power, and we'll just go through the basic flow. I don't know why I don't have to turn on the cruise supply there. But it looks like our performance is staying mainly the same at about 40 FPS, which is definitely satisfactory. And let's now take a look outside. And once we start moving, it takes some FPS off, but overall it's a pretty smooth experience. I am happy to play anything more than 30 when it comes to Flight Simulator, which is not a lot compared to like what you'd expect for like a normal game. But for Flight Simulator, anything more than 30 is completely acceptable. So I'm happy to play on like 46 to 40 FPS, which is about what we're seeing on these settings. So now I kind of want to try out actually flying the aircraft and not just sitting here at the gate, and see how that is going to be looking in terms of FPS. So I'm going to be spawning myself in on runway 26 right. I made sure to keep the same time as before so that the weather does not impact the FPS, so that it's fair for both simulators. So I've loaded in onto the runway here in Paris, and it looks like it's sitting on the ground. We're looking at like 36 FPS, pretty stagnant there. So let's go ahead and try out this takeoff and see what our FPS looks like when we're actually in the air. So parking brake released. Start to move forward here. I have the hiccups. So let's go Togo. I have to say, I feel like the graphics are not amazing at the moment, being on a medium and all, but they're satisfactory at least. Rolling down the runway, we lost about 5 FPS. We're about 30 right now, which is still a fine experience for me. And let's rotate. So given that this is a massive and very busy airport, about 30 FPS on the takeoff is not bad at all. It's not bad at all for Flight Simulator 2020. Quite decent performance, especially given the system I'm running right now. But if you were not to be flying out of one of the biggest airports in the world, I'm sure you can easily get 50 to 60 frames per second with the kind of system that I'm running at the moment. So now that we've kind of taken a look at what we can expect from Flight Sim 2020, let's go ahead and see how 2024 will compare. So here we are in the new simulator, and let's go ahead and check out the graphic settings for this comparison, so make sure they're all consistent. TAA VSync should be off, and we want all the settings at medium, and that looks correct. So let's go ahead and pick out our aircraft, the same A320neo V2 as we did in 2020. We'll go in here, we want passenger transport, and we'll choose that same Iberia livery. Now let's go into our world map here. Make sure we set the correct time. So we want to set the time, this new thing. We would like to set it at, I want to go to the next one, 12 a.m. 6 right here, 1 p.m. just like we did in 2020, and there it is. And now the gates have popped up, and we want to depart from gate E21, and we'll check out what performance looks like sitting at the gate. So we are here in Flight Simulator 2024. As you can see, we're walking around at the moment, and we can't really compare the walking feature because obviously 2020 doesn't have it. But as we walk around the airport, we're getting a pretty poor 25 FPS, which is not really that much of a playable experience. I have to say, I think the graphics look, in some categories they look better, and in some categories they look worse than 2020. I think the lighting and how the actual terminal looks a bit better. I'm not sure what exactly is going on to that jet bridge. But anyways, let's just go ahead and get into the aircraft. So actually inside of the aircraft here, we're looking at about 30 FPS, which is a bit lower than we saw in 2020. And I guess there are some additional things that the simulator has to render, like the good old co-pilot over there. And I'm not sure if the one in 2020 has a cabin. At least I don't remember having a cabin, but this one has quite a detailed cabin that has to render in. So let's go ahead and turn on some systems and see how that will affect the FPS. So batteries will come on. Some of the external power. Let's do the basic stuff here. And it looks like it has affected our performance quite a bit. We dropped down there to about 27 frames per second, and now we're more stable, looking at like 30, but still around 30 to 28 range whenever we start moving around. Overall, I'd say it's a bit lower, but quite similar to 2020. So the next thing, obviously, we should try and see what the performance like when we're actually flying around. So let's go ahead and test that out. So here we are on the runway in Paris in Flight Simulator 2024, and for some reason it spawned me on the completely wrong runway. It spawned me, or I guess it has corrected itself, but originally it spawned me on the incorrect runway, but here we are. And something I've noticed is that while the frames per second is more or less the same for the first test that we did, I feel like it was just the 2024 experience seemed a lot less smooth than what we saw in 2020. Maybe this is something that you guys have noticed, but I think this might just be caused by the amount of latency with all the streaming that goes on in Flight Simulator 2024. but maybe it's just me. So let me know in the comments what has been your experience with that. But now that we're actually on the runway, we're looking at quite a low 25 FPS, which is, I'd say, significantly lower than what we were seeing in 2020. So let's go ahead and take off and see if this performance is actually going to improve. And the parking brake is engaged. Let's go ahead and take off here. And toga. There's a bunch of planes crossing the runway right now. I might hit one of them. We might see a bit of a collision. Hopefully nothing happens here. Oh, we just went straight through them. And we're gonna go ahead and rotate. And performance is still quite bad. Only 20 FPS. We're kind of drifting off here. I guess that's the new turbulence that the simulator features. And the gear needs to go up. Overall, really bad performance on this landing. Like in 2020, the performance from taking off compared to sitting at the gate, it was nearly the same, but we've seen almost like a 15 FPS drop off on this takeoff, and it is really not a smooth experience flying over here. I suppose they have to load in all this scenery around the airport, all the fields and whatnot. It's all being streamed, and it looks like we're overspeeding at the moment. So let me go ahead and put those flaps back down. Overall, yeah, even though I thought the performance would start to improve once we got further up into the air, still about 20, 21 to 22 FPS, which is definitely pretty unplayable for me. So to hear what my thoughts are, I think I've kind of messed around a bit in Flight Sim 2024, and I feel like with my system and my internet connection, it's almost not really feasible for me to spend too much time in 2024. The experience, there's a lot of latency on my end, and it's not very smooth. Meanwhile, I can get an extremely smooth experience on Flight Sim 2020, sorry. And this aircraft in particular, I feel like has performed not up to the standard. Like usually default aircraft, they're pretty optimized, and they usually run quite well in the simulator. But with aircraft like the Phoenix, I've even experienced better performance than this one, which is definitely saying something given how detailed the Phoenix aircraft is. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what are your thoughts in the comments on the performance of these new simulators. I'm curious to see, will you be sticking with 2020 or moving on to 2024? So that's the end of the video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I really will appreciate it, as I'm trying to hit 500 subscribers at the moment. So if you could help me out there, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys in the next one.